This is Real Learning with Real People. These conversations are with real people. They're unscripted and they're designed to pull tidbits of information from people who are grinding right now to get the most out of their lives. With minimum amounts of editing and maximum authenticity, we hope to provide lessons that anybody will find effective, relatable, and entertaining. We seek to have guests that provide learning that's based on their life experiences. Some are chosen because of their experience as high performers in sport, business, or education, and other guests have been chosen because they have meaningful lessons to teach, and I want to make sure they have the platform to share them with the world. The language in these videos is sometimes mature, as I'm always encouraging guests to just be themselves. This is all part of making sure that we do our best to give you content that is both authentic and effective, and that you truly feel like you can utilize the real learning and connect with these real people. ULU stands for Uluntu, Lungisa, Usawa, or in English, Humanity, Justice, and Equity. The founders of ULU are Hedeyiah Karimian, Kadre Gray, and Litha Ncanisa, who is our guest on the show today. The group has designed some unreal clothing in order to get their messages out, but they are so much more than just clothes. They're making a real difference in the world through their support for minorities. Their youth mentorship program is aimed to make marginalized youth feel supported in any way they might feel they need support in order to optimize their individual growth and the growth of their communities. Their youth engagement and education sessions are designed to empower youth self-esteem and encourage their professional and personal growth. In them, they examine Black history in a positive light. They teach Black youth that people resembling themselves are kings, inventors, leaders, and far achieving beyond the perpetuated history where their history begins and ends with slavery. Additionally, they also run allyship training and support students through scholarship programming. They have tough and important conversations. They spread a message that makes the world a better place, and this episode is just that. Litha and I go right towards some topics that I have to admit I was nervous to talk about, and that's exactly why we need to be talking about it. Here's my chat with Litha from ULU.
Ken, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Just relaxing a little bit. You know, September's coming around the corner. Things are gonna get busy again, so I'm taking a little bit of a break. But other than that, like I'm good. I can't really complain. I can't really complain.
That's good. Yeah. And hey, you're kind of just like hanging out right now, I guess. You know,
yes.
Not too much training yet.
No. Because with COVID and everything going on, it's like, you know, it's a different routine now, right?
Yeah.
That I have to get used to as an athlete. But like it slowed a lot of things down. But yeah, now it's just a lot of like relaxing and, you know.
Yeah. No conservation area run.
No, not yet. No, not yet. Not yet. You see, you said that and I felt my knees because every time I run outside, like I get to feel it in the knees.
Yeah, it's lungs. It's lungs too.
That's another thing. Now I have to like getting closer to that run. I have to be mindful of what I eat and how I eat now, because that run makes you reevaluate what you've been eating the past couple of weeks.
That's for sure.
No, for sure. But yeah, today's the day. We've been saying the 31st. Now it's here.
Yeah.
Now it's here. So I'm glad that we're able to sit today and have a conversation, so we can let people know what's coming. And then before that, we have to let them know what our organizations represent and what brings us today to have this conversation. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. Sure. I'm excited to have the chat. The thing that you're talking about that you've been hyping. I'm excited for that, but I'm excited to have the chat too, and see what we can learn from each other and share with some people. So
I love what you just said, where we can learn from each other. You know, because I think that's the only way that growth can manifest, right? When I can be able to listen to you and you can listen to what I have to say, and then we can possibly come to a common ground, right? Because we're human and we both have love and compassion, right? Yeah. So I think it's a matter of understanding each other and be willing to listen to what each other have to say, right? Understanding we have different backgrounds and different maybe perspectives on different certain things. So no, for sure. Like this is the conversation right here. This is the conversation.
And so you want to do your announcement at the end?
We can do, you know what? I love keeping a little bit of secrets from time to time and stuff like this. So we can do this announcements at the end, right? But like we can do like
waiting.
Yes, yes. Let's keep them waiting. So maybe they can also hear, on what we have to say and some of our views of certain things. But what do you think? What do you think? Should I keep them waiting?
Yeah, we can keep them waiting. People are patient these days. They've been at home.
Yes, for sure. They have nowhere to go. It's COVID.
Exactly.
No, for sure.
So in that case, I'm gonna be honest, and I'm gonna tell you, as I was preparing to do this, and you and I had talked about the fact that I can't remember exactly how I put it, but I said I look quite a bit different than the other people that you've had on here that you've done your lives with, right?
Yes, no, for sure.
And as I was preparing for today, I started to realize, and this speaks to exactly what we're talking about. I was nervous. I was nervous to be a white person talking about the stuff that we're going to talk about. So I'm nervous, but I'm nervous in a way that I'm excited because of what it means and of what we can take from it, and hopefully other people can take from it. So
no, for sure. And and I think through our conversation, I also mentioned that the power of, and then it goes back to how we started off, right? Be having the ability to hear from different perspectives.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like previously, I've been consistent. Like people that I've knew on different, they do certain things in the community, right? And I always want to have, as I mentioned, I want to find people from different backgrounds, from different perspectives, because somewhere, somehow, depending if I'm a basketball player, a soccer player, or just a Black individual, there's someone that I share certain views with, or they have the same questions as me, right? And I'm asking these questions that they've probably been wondering for a very long time. So, yes, definitely. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But
and I've got your stuff all locked and loaded for your announcement as soon as we're done.
They don't know what's coming. I want to say just that.
They don't know.
No, for sure. No, so I know I see a couple of my followers here, right? And would you mind sharing a little bit of who you are, Ken, to people that you don't know, and what organization you represent, and those, just a little bit of a brief summary, and then I can share a little bit of Uluntu in case some people don't really know.
Cool. Yeah, so my name's Ken King. I'm a Laurentian grad. I live out in Calgary now, and I came out here to coach basketball and teach at a college, and now I teach at a university out here in Calgary. And Boost Institute is a company I started, and we're a talent development company that works with innovation and training around developing individual and group talent. So anything around performance and talent development, that kind of stuff, whether it's teachers, coaches, athletes, businesses, we do all that kind of stuff. And one of our first core values is to do good and be good. And that really sits in every single thing that we do, is trying to do things that are good for our business, sure, but our city that we live in, our country that we live in, and the world overall. And we like to make it a little lofty and say that hopefully we're able to change the world. So that's a little bit of how we came to work with ULU, and hopefully get to do a lot more stuff like this.
No, for sure. No, thank you for sharing. And it sounds like your Boost Institution is like a one-stop, right? Because you serve so many things in the community, and that's needed, and that's needed. And you're so versatile too, on how you cater on different programs, teaching, you said, and athletes. So I know where to go on certain things. Maybe you can give me tips on how I can do the con run without my knees hurting.
Well, I would train. I would do it once before you do it live.
No, for sure. And so on our conversation piece too, I think it stemmed off from what's happening right now in the world, right?
Absolutely.
It's predominantly in the States. And we had a conversation on why it's important to have this conversation, and people having different understandings of what's really going on, right? Mm-hmm. And we branched off on the book I see behind you, White Fragility, from Robin DiAngelo, which I read it too, and it was a very interesting book. And I advocate on racism a lot, and I've been doing it for quite some time, and even with the work that I do with ULU. And I always wonder, like, because I know that there's certain places where we have these conversations and we're saying, hey, this is facts, like this has happened in the past and this is how it's affecting the present. And I see a lot of resistance, and I also see a lot of people willing to listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always trying to find the common ground in what makes some people want to engage in this conversation, what makes other people afraid to engage in this conversation. And you see it when I have this conversation in a predominantly white community. You see it sometime in the Black community too. And with the Black community, I feel like I have friends that I can pull and talk to and be like, hey, like, this is the work that I do. Tell me like what you think. And I would like to kind of hear from you and from your perspective, right? In a sense where actually I prepared a couple of questions and I spoke to a couple of friends on certain things. And one piece was, so when we talk about like the idea of racism, right? And how it affects different people. And I was wondering, how does racism itself affect anti-racist white people, or like people that want to take a stand, or they want to have these conversations, right? And they seeing what's really going on in society. So how does that affect someone who's involved in the community who wants to bring about change?
It's an interesting question because, like I said, I obviously, but I'm willing to have the conversation by being here, and that I think puts me in the category of being anti-racist. But honestly, after reading D'Angelo's book, I think that concept, that racist or racism, however the term is being applied in any situation, it's really like, it's not meant to be such an attack on the person who is racist or is doing something racist or saying something racist. And when she talked about aversive racism and the idea that like, oh, I have Black friends, or I don't see color, and that's how we as white people really insulate ourselves from, like, okay, I'm not racist because I'm saying I'm not racist, and we're aligning ourselves with being anti-racist. And I got to be honest, it made me reflect, and like, being totally authentic, I meant to read that book until you and I booked this call. Then I went out and bought the book and I read it in 2 days, and I got it done. So I was ready, but I don't want to act like I'm all knowing or anything like that. Like, it's really just my personal opinion, experience. But I think I'm guilty of being an aversive racist by oftentimes, and using my coaching and my involvement in sport as one of those things. And really what I mean is, when somebody would bring up a topic or be a little bit accusatory, I guess, towards white people in general, not towards me, I would have these feelings that would immediately make me bring up, like, the amount of Black people that I have worked with and the amount of time I spend around Black people because I coach basketball, which is in and of itself a racist statement. And this is fresh for me because, like I said, like, I read the book the last 2 days, and aversive racism is something that I'm just coming to understand now. But I think when you talk about being anti-racist and aversive racist, and I think that a lot of us, from where I sit, are caught between those two things. It's really, what can I do to be more anti-racist, and how do I make sure that I'm not just responding to situations to show how against racism I am? I'm actually responding by trying to not be racist. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, for sure. No, like like, as I mentioned earlier, like I like the authenticity. That's how I pronounce the word. My bad. Yeah, English is my fourth language. But no, it's like, and in the book too, like what you mentioned, like it's very obvious, right? And she even pointed it out that one of the biggest steps is acknowledging that, hey, like, maybe I've taken part in it, not even knowing that I was doing it, not even in a malicious way, right? Because, as she says, like, we live in a society, especially in the Western world, where within the white communities, even in school, the school system, the social structure policies, we are taught that, like, things are the way they are. And how did she say it? When she was talking on the piece on, did you see the piece on institutional racism,
Mm-hmm.
and how people want, when they hear the word racist or like racism, they start to individualize themselves and say, hey, like, I'm not racist, I'm on the side, right? And that's not me. But then, like, somehow in the whole structure, there's like racism. You can find it in different places. And I think I saw a quote where it says, you can go around the world and ask everyone around the world, are you racist? And you'll be lucky to get 18% of the people to say, yes, I'm racist. But then when you go to different institutions across the world, you'll find that more than 80% of them, there's like racist policy, racist practices, and we just go by accepting and thinking that that's how the way things should be, right? And kind of giving it more of an examples where we look at, for example, incarceration and like child services, the numbers are still higher in minority communities, right? And then they're like, and people are like, oh, maybe that's how the way it is, or maybe that's what's happening, but it's how maybe the policies are structured, or maybe certain things are looked at by people in authority, right? And I think, and then when we can sit back and say, hey, like, how can we serve these communities better, or understand this community better, so we can like basically slow down the curve, right?
Yep.
And even when you look at places that actually where you see crime, places where there's no crime, it doesn't mean that there's like more police there, right? I can go to Ramsey Lake, I don't see way more police, but there's less crime, right? But there's more facilities, there's more access to certain things that kids can like, not all, I'm not saying every kid in the community, but there's more chances, right? But then when, for example, if I'm going to like a community where, like in a, let's say like what we call the hood, they would call it, right? There's like kids, there's certain things like maybe stuff that happened in the past and stuff that are happening in the present that maybe the politicians can do better in catering, so that they don't have to be trapped in certain things, right? They have more options as kids. And and from that book, like I kind of understood things a little bit better from a different perspective too.
Yeah, and even just the idea of race, right? And I worked with a colleague of mine a couple jobs ago out here in Alberta, and he's actually he's spoken and written a couple really good pieces on race and coaching and that kind of stuff, and he turned me on to Ta-Nehisi Coates, and Between the World and Me was the first book that I read, and then D'Angelo references the one quote in there, race is the child of racism, not the father. And that idea really, that was the first time that I really kind of connected it with the idea of racism, white supremacy, and again, white supremacy being something that's just true, not something that's necessarily the like far right extremists of the world, or
sorry,
like
sorry to cut you off. Can you please expound on that, please, because yeah.
So the concept that they're getting at, and again, it's definitely not my concept, but the idea that racism created race, that came first, and it's not a chicken or the egg kind of concept where it's like we don't know which one came first. White people at some point and largely created race, right? It's just in the sense that, and D'Angelo uses a lot of these examples in her book about how I'm almost never identified by my race. I couldn't pick a single time in my life that somebody's called me like, oh, you know Ken, like the tall white guy. Like maybe once or twice, but how many times are people who are not white identified with race first, or race as part of that initial introduction? And that is a racist tendency. The same that's a sexist tendency is like when Bic, I don't know if you saw when Bic, the pen company, created Bic for Her pens, and they put out these pens that they had like softer grip, and they were purple and pink, and they were their pens, but just for women because they were soft and pink. It's like that was sexist, and it really is that, just like there's those moments where somebody has imposed the racist concept, one of which is the idea that race is even a thing, because we're not different unless we describe it in terms of race, and we have decided to describe it in terms of race.
No, definitely. No, for sure. You really read this. You really read this book and understood it, because I remember too, because at one point she even says it, like, you're right, like in a point where they say, when you started seeing evidence of race, its main point and its main purpose was to advance one group and not the other, right? Yep. And that's what that structured the whole thing, and how everything was put in place to make sure that things stayed that way, right? And I think we spoke about it too, like this example, how in Canada in the past we were talking about, I think it was the Common Act, where they said they were segregating kids, for example, to different schools. So black kids couldn't go to the same school as white kids, right? And the justification for that was they wanted to protect the white kids from the dangerous black kids, right?
Yeah.
And then it wasn't just separating them to different schools got different fundings. Different fundings receive different programs. Different programs receive different, like counseling, for example, textbooks, for example, opportunity and a chance to go into university, and then so on and on and on and on, right? But it goes right back to what we mentioned. That was the idea of racism. It wasn't just to distinguish and identify each other's skin color, but also to put in place a system that advances one and puts another person in a disadvantage. Yeah. And having these conversations and identifying where these things lie, then we'll be able to bring about change.
Yeah, and
so no, for sure.
And that's a great concept too, because I really work a lot in the area of fear and teaching how to use fear, and that it's natural. And you and I have kind of touched on this before, that white people have a lot of fear, and that's in my conversations as I was preparing to come on here with white friends, white colleagues. But the thing that we have to realize about fear, regardless of why it exists, is that fear is the cause, not the symptom. So we don't turn it on and off. Fear is physiological. We have parts of our brain that are designed to push us away from things that we don't know, that we aren't used to, or that we aren't expecting. And it's something that I actually learned teaching adapted phys ed in the college I was working at, which is that there are three things that really cause us these highly emotional reactions. Unknown differences, so where we didn't know it existed. So if I live in an area where there are no black people, and a black person moves, and I'm a young child or even an adult, I've never seen a black person, I'm going to feel a bunch of different things because I've never experienced that. It's unknown to me. I didn't even know it existed. Imagine there's no internet or anything like that. I didn't know there were black people. Then there's unexpected differences. So the example I love for this comes from the world of disability, which is, imagine you're sitting in the doctor's office waiting for the doctor to come in, like a walk-in clinic, so you get a different doctor every time, and the doctor comes in and they're using a wheelchair. You're going to have a reaction to that. It's not because you're amazed that people use wheelchairs. You know people use wheelchairs. It's not because you don't think a doctor can use a wheelchair. It's because you're not expecting the doctor to use a wheelchair. It's just not something that you're expecting in that moment. And then the other difference that causes this fear-based reaction in us is the unfamiliar difference. So again, coming back to race, if I grew up in an area that's predominantly white, and I grew up in a time that has internet, unlike the first example, and I'm aware of the world, so I know there's black people in the world, but there just aren't any where I live. And then all of a sudden I moved to Atlanta. And while I'm in Atlanta and I moved to this predominantly black neighborhood, this unfamiliar difference where I was aware of it, I was expecting it, but I'm just not familiar to it, is going to create a fear-based response as well. And so it's important to understand that people are scared. You don't say, hey, don't be scared. You don't say, hey, calm down to somebody that needs to calm down. You don't say, hey, don't be sad to somebody who's just had a loved one die. And you don't tell people whether or not they do or don't have a right to be scared, because it's happening. It's inside their brain. It's a chemical experiment that's happening. But the symptom of the fear is what you can do something about. And people show fear symptoms in a million ways. People get mad when they're scared. People get sad when they're scared. People tend to isolate. People will use humor when they're scared. Like any athletes will be familiar with the person who's come and tried out for a team and is like the jokester when he's trying out, but you're pretty sure he's the worst one there because he's terrified. Right? So
you throw shots at me? You throw shots at you talking to coach? You talking to coach a lot? I'm playing.
But it's one of those things where it's not about making white people not scared. It's about understanding that a lot of white people are scared. Their actual reason for being scared could be valid in someone's mind or not. It could be because maybe I'm scared because it means that there's not going to be as many jobs for white people. Maybe I'm scared because there's going to be maybe there's reparation. Somebody's talking about reparation, so it means money. I'm losing money. Maybe I'm scared because I actually think black people are dangerous. I'm not saying that those are valid reasons, but there are reasons. Okay. And so when those reasons come up, it's not about trying to undo the scared. It's about trying to teach through the symptom. So if you're scared and you're angry, let me teach you why you don't need to be scared and angry. If you're scared and you're joking around about it, making all these jokes about black people, well, let me teach you through some. I'll use some humor and actually teach you why you don't need to be scared of that. And just bridging that gap a little bit. I'm not saying that it's a solution to a problem. By no means am I saying that, but I think that it is different when you approach people understanding that they are scared, and you can't change that by telling them that they shouldn't be scared or not be scared. And the validity or lack of validity and why they're scared and getting too deep in the why is just going to delay the actual learning.
Wow. That's well said. No, definitely, Ken. I appreciate that. Thank you. And you mentioned something that kind of relates to what Robin DiAngelo had said about the concept even of white fragility, right? And people becoming uncomfortable when they're hearing the conversation of race, or people becoming uncomfortable when they're seeing news that are relating to race, right? And it goes back to, she pointed at being three things that plays a role. I think she says it's the habitus, the capital, and the field, right? Mm-hmm. And the habitus goes back to what you said, the environment in which they're used to, the expressions they use, their language, the social cues, the expressions, right? Yeah. So if, for example, you live in a very small town up way up north, right, your whole life, and then you're seeing a black person for the very first time, right? So it plays a role in how you'll be uncomfortable when, for example, she said, seeing them walking into the room, you've never seen or interacted with one before, or maybe what you've seen in the news or the media has been perpetuated in a certain way that brings about that fear, mm-hmm. right? And then when you bring in the concept of field, it's in the environment in which you are in, right? Yeah. So, for example, if I'm a black student, and as a black student, and I'm in a predominantly white community, right? And it's am I gonna be standing front in line all the time, wanting to advocate and say, hey, what's going on is not fair. What's going on is not fair. Also knowing that there's a chance that 99% of the people around me will not agree with what I'm saying or go against what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So that's kind of that's an example. Those are two examples of what she said. And then the third one was capital, the power in which you hold in the society, right? And that also, if I'm a student and then I have a white teacher, for example, and then the teacher says something that's racist, am I going to be willing to challenge them, knowing that they dictate at the end of the year what's going to be my grade, right? And then it also goes back to what they've known, where did they grow up, which school did they go to, and then now they're coming and having this like Black student with their own biases, right? And she even mentions that we all have, I know this is like a different point, but we all have biases. And if we can identify our biases, then we can work again, like we can work against them. So we can work towards fixing those biases.
Yep.
And I really liked that piece where she spoke about that, right? The concept of we all have biases. When we have biases towards a different race, person from a different community, and then when we don't check our biases, then we start to discriminate against those people, right? Because based on your biases. For example, if you're seeing Black people perceived as criminal all the time, when you see one standing or walking towards you, do you cross the road if you see them at night, right? It's stuff that I've came across. And she says it goes from biases to discrimination, and then depending on the color of your skin, when she was talking about the concept of race, then racism comes about, right? Yeah. So I think that piece was like very, very, very interesting, like very interesting in how she had put it.
Totally. And having those biases, I think, I know this to be true for myself, brings up another fear thing, which is the fear of being racist, coming back to that aversive racism. Like we all act differently when we're scared. If I'm in a situation where I might be perceived as racist, i.e. anytime I'm having a race conversation with somebody who's not my race, I'm going to react differently than maybe I want to if I'm not practiced in managing my own fear in any situation. Like if all I'm doing in this conversation with you right now is focusing on not coming off as racist or not being racist or not saying anything racist, you and I can barely have the conversation, which speaks to the bigger issue, which is that it's hard to even get the learning and take the next steps when the white people, or when there are white people who don't even want to be authentically involved in the conversation and show up because they might say something wrong. And because and again, I'm not saying the fear is valid or invalid. I'm just saying that there is that fear there where it's like, sure. I might not be scared of you, of a Black person taking my job or of reparation payments or of anything like that. But maybe I'm just scared of being seen as racist. So I act inappropriately or differently than I would otherwise.
And like Robin, she even mentioned it too, saying that we have to understand that sometimes some of these things they're unconscious, like we don't even realize that they're there, right? And a person that feels like, oh, I mean, I'm feeling this discomfort, and she's like, it's okay to feel that. Like it was stuff that was structured and was put in place before we were even born, right? Yeah. And we just fed through it, through the media, through textbooks, through policies, for example. And then she says, you can have a lawyer that can go through their whole life of education and go to law school and finish that with never having the opportunity or even getting involved in a conversation of race, right? Or even a teacher, for example. Yeah. And it's like, without even having those conversations. And then even some classes where they talk about race, the language they use is very fragile. Totally. For example, they'll say, it says, even in the book, she says, you go in a class where they talk about race, and then they'll tell you about urban community, underprivileged, but they don't point out the other side, the privileged, right? Because they're like, I don't want, like it's put in a way that white has become so fragile that you can't point it out, And then she even said, white as invisible it's like invisible, that you mentioned it too earlier about you never had to identify as, like you said, Ken the white guy. You said, wait, how did you say it?
Yeah, Ken the tall white guy.
Right, but then for me, if I'm walking in the room, Litha, like the Black guy that, so it's like those things where white has been structurally put in place that it can be invisible, right? Yeah. So, and you see it in even how we talk about, even in history, where we talk about the civil rights movement, the first Black baseball player, for example. And we're like, oh yeah, like they teach it that way. But then why don't you talk about why he's the first Black player that played in the sports? And like, why don't you just say, hey, he's the first Black person that white baseball team owners allowed to play in the league,
Yeah.
right? Because it's fragile. They don't want to touch it, right? And it's put that way, and we're gonna learn it. Like that's gonna build who I am. That's gonna build who you are until we recognize it and learn to like handle it. That it doesn't control us, we control it. Like we control our biases in a sense. So I think that's what people have to get into, in a sense where when you're feeling uncomfortable, go back and be like, why am I uncomfortable? Yeah. What makes me uncomfortable on this conversation? And maybe I need to learn more on it. And maybe I need to engage in this conversation even more, because you're right. Like, they have to be had. These conversations have to be had.
Yeah.
If we have to bring about change, it's deeper than just T-shirts.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And the thing that we talked about before about race being the child of racism, not the father. Mm. She also connects that with the idea, and this is something that sticks with me a lot, is the fact that white people live with the freedom of the burden of race. We are almost never burdened by anything to do with race in any aspect of our life. Same thing as we were talking about with the identifier of race being an identifier. Mm. I in my white bubble, there's no amount of burden that is in my life that is because of my race. There's nothing holding me back that has to do with my race. She told a story in the book about a friend who moved to a different neighborhood in Louisiana, I think it was, New Orleans, and she said that the friend was bragging about how cheap the house was, but then also said that she would have to buy a gun. And right away, they all knew in the conversation that she was talking about a predominantly black neighborhood. It's like nobody ever, like, I don't live in the safest neighborhood in Calgary. Hey, like I'm not like living up on the hill with like this amazing property or anything like that. Boost Institute isn't doing that well yet. But I will say that nobody comes to this neighborhood and says, "Oh, I might need a gun because of that neighborhood." Why? This neighborhood's almost all white. It's not that safe, but it is very white. And nobody describes it violently. Nobody describes it around that same way in the conversations that I've been a part of. Now, I do know of neighborhoods that I won't name that people do identify as sketchy, like she says in the book. And they are not predominantly white. They're predominantly black and brown. And as soon as somebody says sketchy and describes it as like, yeah, that so-and-so area is pretty sketchy, in my mind as a white person, and this isn't, I hope you understand this is for the purposes of learning. When they say that neighborhood is sketchy, in my mind, I see black and brown people. I don't want to, but that is what happens. And that speaks to what you're talking about, which is that it's so socialized, so institutionalized. I've often said I've been lucky in my life because I've had teachers who taught me about racism and coaches who taught me about racism. But then after reading the book, I thought about it and I was like, not a single one of them was black. They're all white. So they're teaching it with that white fragility lens that you're talking about, where it's like, they taught me about racism, but they taught me about it in like the most sugar-coated way that it could possibly be. And how much and the one thing was very clear, I was not to ever be racist. But as you know from reading the book, we're actually, and like I said, like I am confident that I've said aversive racist things, trying hard not to come off as racist, as opposed to just saying like, oh, tell me more about that. Like, I don't know, like, why are you reacting to me that way? Like, instead it's just like, oh no, like I've worked around black people for a really long time. I coach basketball, right? And I'm not proud of that, but until reading the book, I didn't realize how much I probably act that way because it's so socialized.
Yeah, and like and you know what? It goes back to what, like, I really like how you said, and even how she mentioned, like, and I think that's the first step, I think, from my perspective. If I would say, like, white friends or allies and people who wants to understand race, is evaluating, like, their community. Evaluating goes back to the biases, right? You even just mentioned, like, you have had your biases, and you don't want them to be there, but they're there. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because everywhere you turn, you're gonna, like, they installed. It can be in the movies, for example, and it's not a mistake that in movies, even if we're talking about Egypt, they'll have kings like a pure white king, and they can't have the black people are the servers, right? Yeah, yeah. So it's like, and everything is put that way for a reason, right? And in textbooks, in our languages, right? Like when we say, like, this is actually, it's a word that it's a phrase that I've had conversations around, and, like, I'm not saying I saw it in a book or stuff like that, but even the concept of people of color, right? Yeah. So we say people of color, and I think the definition of it is people who don't have family descendants of Europe, right? But what that does is it puts everyone in one category and, like, white in its own category, right? Yeah. But from my understanding, if white's not a color, is black a color? You know, so, and it goes back to, like, and that's what I'm saying, like, it's good to have these conversations, because I'm like, I saw something and I'm like, okay, I want to think about it and kind of want to think on it, right? Maybe I don't know a lot about colors, but if they're saying white's not, because from my understanding, from a young kid, I used to say black's my favorite color until like grade 6. There was this girl who was sitting in class. She asked me what my favorite color is. I said black. She's like, actually, black is not a color, and that shattered my whole world. That shattered my whole world.
Hit you with that reality.
Yeah, like, this shattered my whole world. I'm like, yeah, you're no longer my cousin no more. We're not family. We're not friends. None of that, you know. And I never looked back. So now it goes back to this conversation that I'm having right now. If black's not the color, then what do they mean when they see people of color? Yeah. Right. And you know, and it can be questions like this. Someone can be like, yeah, that question doesn't make sense. But it's asking these questions that I don't understand, right? Or asking these questions that I would like to understand more on, or even engage in conversations with, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's where it is. And if I'm just stopping at, oh, I don't want to be wrong, or I don't want to offend somebody else, and then that's when, like, it puts that boundary of having the ability to have those conversations. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and I was interested too, as I was getting ready to do this, because it's funny, the same stuff that we're talking about around fear and around being unwilling or wondering about whether or not you should be involved in the conversation. We had people tell us that maybe the business shouldn't do this, right? Like, we've talked about that. In the context of what you're going to be announcing at the end of this, and the context of this conversation live on here, it positions, in some people's mind, our company and me and everybody in it in a certain space. And people asked us whether or not we wanted to position ourselves that way. And and you and I have laughed about this before. It was like, I'm not racist, Ken, but I do think that you should think twice about doing this.
That butt.
Yeah, that butt really hits you. And it just became one of those things where it's like, and some of them were a little bit more, in my opinion, valid than others. Some people were saying, well, there's going to be people that see it and really think that the only reason why you're working with them or why you're doing this is because you want to be, like, topical, like you want to be a part of the movement right now, and you want like, you're self-promoting, you're using it self-promotion wise. And I can see how people would think that, but that comes back to the exact same concept of, and I guess I don't really want to swear on here, but, like, you kind of got to be like, F that. Like, so who is going to be in the conversation then? Like, if all white people are like, well, I don't want to be the person who looks like I'm doing this just so I can be involved in looking like I support it. Well, then none of us are supporting it if none of us are willing to get up and talk about it, in spite of what somebody's going to say or think. And that's other white people being like double racist.
It's a double. No.
It's like no, we are so not racist that we don't want you to pretend to be racist by going on and having that conversation on Instagram, or pretend to be not racist by having that conversation. And it's like yeah, but then nobody is.
We'll have it. And I think there was an article where a teacher got suspended for posting she was having a class virtually, and she posted at the back BLM, right? Mm-hmm. And she got suspended. Like parents sent letters to the school and stuff like that. It kind of goes back to that, and it's
fear, man.
It's definitely.
Because you know what I would say. You know what I would say to those parents, and I've actually said this to a parent who I was talking to about this very topic was. I think you're scared to have to talk to your daughter or son about Black Lives Matter because you don't know what to say. So you don't want, it's not that they're like that maybe they are against Black Lives Matter, and that's a conversation that would need to be had in a different lane. But maybe they're not against it. They're just against the idea of having to teach about something that they know jack shit about. And that scares them. They don't want their kid getting off the Zoom call and being like, "Mom, I want to know more about Black Lives Matter." They're like, "Oh shit! Like I don't know anything about that." Or they're gonna perpetuate what you and I have been talking about and say like, "Well, honey, we've got a lot of Black friends. You should ask them." And maybe that is the best route, but I think that even in that situation, it's just, are you just scared that you're going to have to bring up something that you aren't comfortable with?
And it goes back to a parent even asked like, what's the right age to teach my kid about racism, about that concept? And I think I saw a tweet where it said, if young kids like in grade 1 or even grade school where they already experiencing racism at that age, then I think if they're old enough at that age to experience racism, I think your child will be old enough also to learn about racism. Right, because that's all concepts and there's all behavior that's taught, right? And like the hate and all of that. Because remember how we started at the beginning? I said we both have compassion. Like as a human, you don't even have to think about to have compassion. And we are all born knowing how to love and how to have compassion, right? Yeah. So hate is something that's taught, right? Yeah. And I think having that conversation with young kids that this identifying what wrong is, this is what's wrong, this is what had happened. And this is why and how you shouldn't act. This is what you need to understand growing up and stuff like that. So I think, it's a conversation on all boards at all ages. I think it's worth having.
Yeah, and really understanding that though it can, and does, in many cases, racism or being racist doesn't mean you hate. You can be racist and not hate, right? Like it, and I think that's where the aversive racism stuff really comes up, in my opinion, on the feelings of white people, is that like, well, I don't hate Black people, I'm not racist. It's like, oh, like I believe that you don't hate. I believe that, like, you're not. You see somebody in need, that regardless of their skin color, you will help them. But that doesn't mean that you've never said anything, never been a part of any practice, never been a part of institutionalizing it. And this is something that I'm just, again, trying to learn and wrap my head around now, is the idea that like, I'm trying to figure out where I sit with what's more dangerous, the overt, and don't get me wrong, like it's obviously terrible, the super overt white nationalist, far right leaning kind of racism that unfortunately exists. But is that more dangerous than the ones that are pretending like they're not and don't even know that they're pretending like they're not? I don't think it is. I think I think a bigger part of the problem might be the white people that think they're not racist when they are, including me. I'll include myself in that, like we talked about at the beginning.
And you know what? Who was I talking to? Andy. Yes, Andy. We were talking about if a person doesn't like you or people don't support you, like the best thing is for them to come forward and say, hey, I don't like, being honest about it, you know? Because when they're saying, for example, when people say, like the fact that people are even starting to live in a society where white supremacy and policies that put people down because of their skin color, and we are moving on with our day and thinking it's not a problem. It's all stems from people saying it doesn't exist. It's not here. I'm not seeing it. Like it's something of the past, right? And it's something in the past, but people, for example, like this, for example, I've seen stuff where people are being lynched in 2020 in the States. People are being killed in broad daylight in 2020. You know, people are posting, last week in Sudbury, a friend of mine sent me a video of a person spray painted a white supremacy quote, right, in 2020. But then we're saying, oh no, it's not there. It's not there, right? And I think it's also part of the privilege that they can move forward and say it's not there. Because I'm thinking about it, I'm like, hey, like, it's here and it will affect me some way and somehow. If I'm lucky enough to dodge a couple of things, maybe my kids in the future or my friends' kids in the future are going to experience it. Because, so I think it does affect me. So like, I don't have that privilege to deny it, right? Yeah. So, and like, when we actually really look at things, like it's there, you know, it's really there.
Well, we as white people really want to be able to pat ourselves on the back and say that we got rid of racism. I think that's one thing that I've felt a lot when talking about it is when we talk, it's so much better now than it was in the 60s. Like that, you hear that all the time. Like, oh, it's so much better. Remember, like at least everybody can go to whatever school they want. Well, no, actually they can't. And the fact that you keep telling everybody that is why they still can't. And the idea that it's gone, it's like, it's as if desegregation came, for example, and Voting Rights Act and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden it was like fixed. Just don't look over there at the problems that are still happening and you're going to feel like it's fixed, but that's not the case.
And I'm thinking of another example that sounds like super simple. Like I know so many, as an international student, I know so many international students or like people with African names that think, hey, I got to change my name so I get an opportunity. I got to change my name from something that's like, that represents my family name or like a name that I got from maybe my dad or my uncle. And I have to change it to like James or like John or a name that's easier to pronounce, because I've heard it in a workshop where they said, hey, like if you're trying to get a job, change your last name or your first name, because it's going to be a name that they're familiar with and they can be able to read and understand. So how far back did we leave racism? You know what I'm saying? So, and people can be like, hey, it's not here. Like you're getting the same opportunity. Look, you're in the same school as me. But when you put the resumes down here, so many jobs are going to be like, you know what? And I even know some people that are very, very, very qualified, but like their background or their name plays a role in how they are evaluated through an interview or through like opportunities and stuff like that. I'm not saying everywhere, but it's still evident, right? Yeah. And I think people kind of have to kind of look at that, or even look in their workplaces or their community and look at the structure of it, who holds power in certain places and why is that? And then it's so many things. But
did you in that book, I flagged the page. Are we going to get kicked off of here? Is Instagram
actually? Yeah, I think we have about 5, because we started like, I think we have about 5 minutes and we have to do the announcement, but
yeah.
It's on you. Yeah, it's all on you. I'm good.
No, I wanted to, I know I flagged it in here. Mm. She lists the, I won't read it in the interest of time, but she lists the percentage of.
Ooh, I just saw that. That yesterday.
Power in there that is distributed in as of 2016, 2017. And I don't think there's a single number under 80% that's white. And it's like government.
It's page 31.
Yeah. That list.
Yes, like, page 31.
I was looking at it, and that's where she's like, and she references in around there like, hey, please stop thinking that because Obama was president that racism stopped. Like,
do you know how many racism, like how much racism he was getting even within his party?
Yeah.
It was insane. Like people, hey, we had a black president. I think people have to dig deeper and say there's evidence that shows how his experience was living in a White House, you know, and you know what I'm saying, and where it shows his experience and how things were. People in his own party were like turning their back on him.
Yeah. And
then mostly because of the skin color. And he was very humble. He handled it very well. I could have never told. Yeah. But so even him, like it doesn't matter. Like they say with athletes, you make millions of dollars. Why are you talking about this? 4 years ago or 3 years ago, LeBron had the N-word spray painted in his house. Was it in LA? Yeah. And it's like money, like it doesn't matter like how much money you have and stuff like that. Like it will affect you somewhere and somehow. If it's not you, the generation before, like after you. So
that's why.
No, for sure. So for sure. No, okay, Ken, man. This is.
Tell the people the things.
What's going on right now? I've been keeping this. My chest is heavy. I've been keeping this secret for too long, but this is what's going on. So ULU and Boost Institute, what we're doing right now, is we have this big project we've been working on. I know Ken has not been sleeping. His team has not been sleeping, and right now we have our material, our merch on the website, and with some of the. I think it was a t-shirt or a backpack. I have to double check on that. But there were some items that when people buy them, the money that they pay for them will be sent to different organizations in our communities. And so if people can check that out. And it's really cool. Like it's a really cool website. Like I could go on and spend all my money in the world because of how it's laid out. But so we have that lined up. And then we have our own website actually, which is, I think it's live right now, and we'll put that on on the post at the end. But if you get a chance, please go check out. We have some nice merch out there, like really nice designs. I have a couple of videos and pictures I wanted to post, but I didn't want to spoil it. I wanted you guys to see it the same time as everybody else. But is there anything else that I'm missing, Ken, or anything that you want to add?
The only thing I wanted to add is I'm pumped, and our company's pumped to work with you guys, and we're excited that we'll be giving all the proceeds back to you so you can do the work that you do. And we're honored to be working together, and we're going to need to do another live because an hour's not enough for these conversations.
No. Yo, I'm here. I'm here. And I'm here. Like, as I said, like an hour is not enough. And maybe some people will not be able to come across it, but hopefully people can come across these videos, and those who came have learned something. But I appreciate your perspective, and for you being honest, right? And I'm also trying to be honest too in any way possible, because that's the only way that we can learn and understand each other, and that's the only way we can move forward. And it's not a black and white thing. It's right and wrong, right? And I've had friends like. Moving from South Africa, coming to BC, then from BC to Ontario, I've had friends from different races, and I've seen so many beautiful people, inside out, So I think there's so much that we can achieve if we can kind of come together in our commonality as human beings, right? And what we were all born with, love and compassion, and bring about change, because this is it's a complex system. Right? And we have to identify it, understand it, so we can dismantle things that are holding a lot of people back. But kind of goes back. Let me know when you're free and when we can have this conversation again on a different platform if you'd want to. But thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your team, for everything you guys have been doing. And for also, you don't have to read that book, you don't have to learn more of what's going on, but you're choosing to do that. And it's affecting so many different people. And for me, it also shows that it goes back to beautiful people. And that's beautiful to see that you're taking your stuff that you don't even have to do, right? But you're doing it, and it gives hope, right? And I thank you for that. I thank you for that.
No problem.
I thank you for that.
I appreciate you, man. I think our next step is we have a forum. We let anybody you want sign in, and you and I have the chat. We make it a group thing.
You know what? I'm all for it. I'm all for it. We have 1 minute. We have 1 minute and 50. We have 1 minute and 50 seconds. Yeah. Instagram was kind of late, but we're good. But yeah, I really enjoyed today's conversation. Actually, let me ask you one more thing.
Okay.
Is there anything that you would like people to leave with, like a thought, a quote, a question, a statement you share in the book? Like it can be anything, like an end of thing, or a book you recommend, anything.
The one that came to mind when I was reading the book, though maybe I am stealing it from the book. I don't know for sure. So if I am, sorry to D'Angelo for stealing that. But I really truly believe that it's impossible to hate if your goal is to learn. And there's no room for hate when you're focusing on learning.
You said it's impossible to hate when you're trying to learn.
When you're focused on learning, yeah.
You better tell me who said that so that I can quote it. You don't have to tell me now, though.
I don't know.
I love that.
Maybe it's me. I'll look it up.
if you oh man, because I don't want to go out and say it and quote the wrong person. You don't have to do it right now, but if you can let me know, I love that.
Yeah, man. I just Googled it and it says something about Mr. Rogers, but not the same thing.
Nah, I think I'll quote you. I'll quote you.
Cool, man.
I can. I appreciate you and thank you very much.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Have a good evening. I'm looking forward. I'm going to the website right now. It's up right now?
Yeah, it's up. It's live. Make sure to check out Uluntu.ca and boostbuys.net/collection/ULU in order to support. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get podcasts or to this YouTube channel to hear our weekly episodes.